All right, we're back with Proclus's commentary on the Timaeus, and we've been looking at the gifts of Athena and how those were given in slightly different ways to the Sacheans, or Sacheans, as I think I would prefer to call them, than Satans, which is how it's written in the Taylor translation here. But yeah, how those gifts are given differently between the two cities. Both are in the train of Athena in some sense, or under her allotment. We looked at how the allotments work. The allotments are kind of by necessity and by will, because for higher beings like those gods, their acts of will and their necessitated appointments are more or less coincident. Whereas for us, there's a real distinction between fate and that which is within our power. So, let's see. We're going to back up slightly to this quote here. Yep. The goddess, therefore, being a lover both of war and wisdom, first selected this place for the habitation of men most similar to herself. In what is here said, Plato delivers to us the most accurate conception respecting this greatest divinity, unfolding to those who are sufficiently able to perceive his meaning the indications of theologists. Different interpreters, however, betake themselves to different arrangements of the goddess, some indeed narrating their opinion more enigmatically, but others more clearly, yet not confirming what they assert. For Porphyry, placing Athena in the moon, says the souls descend from thence, which possess at one and the same time irascibility and mildness, and that on this account the mystagogues in Eleusis are lovers of wisdom and lovers of war, since it is said that the race of those who are leaders of the mysteries in Eleusis is derived from Musaeus, the offspring of the moon, and also that the Hermes there subsists about the moon, from which also the race of the criers is derived. The divine Iamblichus, however, blames these assertions as not well preserving the analogy, for he interprets war as that which entirely subverts the whole of a disorderly, confused, and material nature, but wisdom as immaterial and separate intelligence. He also says that this goddess is the cause of both these, which likewise the Athenians imitate through a prudent and warlike life. He adds that the Athenian regent is well adapted to the reception of such like souls. Okay. If, however, it be requisite that the conceptions of these men should become manifest, and prior to these, that which is delivered by Plato should be shown to accord in the highest degree with theologists, we must assert as follows, deriving what we say from a supernal origin. In the demiurge, and father of the whole world, many orders of gods that have the form of the one present themselves to the view. And these are of a guardian, or demiurgic, or elevating, or connective, or perfective characteristic. So we have 5 classes of gods here. The form of the one, I think, indicates that they have their source in a henad, that is an aspect of unity within the first hypostasis. So guardian, demiurgic, elevating, connective, perfective. And it would be nice to have a list of all the gods and which category they fall in. So as we get indications, Hephaestus was demiurgic, Zeus was demiurgic, but maybe they can be in multiple categories. Not sure about that. We'll keep going though. But the undefiled and untamed deity Athena is one of the first intellectual unities subsisting in the demiurge, according to which he himself remains firm and immutable, and all things proceeding from him participate of inflexible power, and through which he intellectually perceives everything, and is separate in an exempt manner from all beings. So the manner of Zeus's intellectual perception is via Athena. All theologists, therefore, call this divinity Minerva, as being brought forth indeed from the summit of her father and abiding in him, being a demiurgic, separate, and immaterial intelligence. Hence Socrates in the Cratylus celebrates her as Theone, or deific intellection. But theologists also consider her as in conjunction with other divinities sustaining all things in the one demiurge and arranging wholes together with her father. Hence, through the first of these, they denominate her philosophic, but through the second, philopolemic. For she, according to the form of the one, connectedly contains all the paternal wisdom, is a philosopher. And she, who invariably rules over all contrariety, may be properly called a lover of war. Hence Orpheus, speaking of her birth, says that Jupiter generated her from his head, with armor shining like a brazen flower. Since, however, it was necessary that she should proceed into second and third orders, she appears in the order to which Persephone belongs, according to the undefiled heptad. But she generates every virtue from herself and elevating powers, and illuminates secondary natures with intellect and an undefiled life. Hence, she is called Kore Tritogenes. Okay, so that undefiled order of gods, same one in which Persephone exists, there she generates every virtue and generates elevating powers, illuminating secondary natures with intellect and an undefiled life. She likewise appears among the liberated gods at the next order, uniting the lunar order with intellectual and demiurgic light, causing the productions of those divinities to be undefiled and demonstrating the one unity of them to be unmingled with their depending powers. She also appears in the heavens and the sublunary region, and according to the united gift of herself, imparts the cause both of the philosophic and the philopolemic power. Okay, so philosophical abilities are governed by Athena, especially. Socrates is said to be in the train of Zeus. He says that of himself in the Phaedrus, and yet Proclus believed he was in the train of Athena. So I think those in the train of Zeus were said to be of a philosophical nature in the Phaedrus. So I guess being in the train of Athena, you're sort of also in the train of Zeus. But here we say, like, proximately in the sublunary region, she imparts the cause of the philosophic power and the philopolemic power. For her inflexibility is intellectual, and her separate wisdom is pure and unmingled with secondary natures. And the one characteristic peculiarity of Athenaic providence extends as far as to the last orders. For since wherever there are partial souls that resemble her divinity, they exert an admirable prudence and exhibit an unconquerable strength. What ought we to say of her attendant choirs of daimons, or divine, mundane, liberated, and ruling orders? For all these receive as from a fountain the twofold peculiarity of this goddess. Hence also the divine poet Homer, indicating both these powers of Athena in conjunction with fabulous devices, says, "The radiant veil her sacred fingers wove floats in rich waves and spreads the court of Jove. Her father's warlike robe her limbs invest." In which verses, by the veil which she wove, and to which she gave subsistence by her intellections, her intellectual wisdom is signified. Her intellectual wisdom. The veil was said before to be, at some level, the cosmic war, which is at the same time the kind of ordering principles of the cosmos. So, Hephaestus applies the logos spermatikos logos, reason principles of nature, but the reason principles of nature themselves subsist in a fabric, the veil woven by Athena. Here, though, the veil signifies her intellectual wisdom. But by the warlike robe of Jupiter, we must understand her demiurgic providence, which immutably takes care of mundane natures and prepares more divine beings always to have dominion in the world. So she has demiurgic providence by participation of her father Zeus, probably. I don't know if that means she also is a demiurgic god. We'd speculated maybe she's a guardian god. Not sure. Immutably takes care of mundane natures and prepares more divine beings always to have dominion in the world. Hence also I think Homer represents her as an associate in battle with the Greeks against the barbarians, just as Plato here relates that she was an associate with the Greeks against the inhabitants of the Atlantic island, in order that everywhere more intellectual and divine natures may rule over such as are more irrational and vile. For Mars also is a friend to war and contrarieties, but with a separation and division more adapted to the things themselves. Minerva, however, connects contrariety and illuminates the subjects of her government with union. Hence, likewise, she is said to be philopolemic, for strife, fighting, war, she always loves. Okay, so Ares is a friend of war, but is adapted to the warlike things. So he's more the oppositional aspect of war, whereas Minerva is like the contraries in their union. The union of contraries that are in conflict is that cosmic war, which is the fabric of things, generally underlying the cosmos. So I guess that distinction is clear. How does Athena preside over war? How does Mars or Ares preside over war? Ares is presiding over the combatants, more or less, as combatants in their separation. And then Athena governs like the war as a whole, as a united whole. And she is a friend to war, indeed, because she is allotted the summit of separation. But she is a lover of contrarieties because these are in a certain respect congregated through this goddess in consequence of better natures having dominion. On this account, so contraries are ordered by her. She fights for the better over the worse. So they come together in her, loving the contraries. The summit of separation, I guess that would be because the demiurge, she's like straight from the head of the demiurge and bestows energies. She was said, like, at one point to be a very high level goddess and cosmically, but lower among the intelligible gods. But that may make sense as a summit of separation then, because she's a very high level god over the world. And I still am wondering whether it's possible to actually equate Athena with the world soul, because at one point Proclus went from discussing Athena to discussing the world soul and referred to the world soul as a her, which makes sense because all souls are female. Or we at least use that gender to describe souls. So yeah, exactly where Athena falls, we have to keep an eye out for, and whether it's possible maybe to equivocate between Athena and the world soul. That is very speculative, but I just had the feeling maybe that was in the background there. Okay. In consequence of better natures having dominion, so she unites the contraries and contains them. On this account, likewise, the ancients co-arranged victory with Athena. So Nike, I think, with Athena. If, therefore, these things are rightly asserted, she is philosophic indeed, as being demiurgic intelligence, and as separate and immaterial wisdom. Hence, also, she is called Metis by the gods. But she is philopolemic, as connecting the contraries in wholes, and as an untamed and inflexible deity. On this account, likewise, she preserves Dionysus undefiled, but vanquishes the giants in conjunction with her father. So in the myth where Dionysus is consumed by the Titans, Athena and Zeus work together to defeat the Titans, I think. But okay. She too alone shakes the Aegis without waiting for the mandate of Zeus. She also hurls the javelin. Shook by her arm, the massy javelin bends, huge, ponderous, strong, that when her fury burns, whole ranks of heroes tames and overturns. Again, she is phosphorus, as every way extending intellectual light. The savior, as a so these are like, what do you call that? Epithets. Epithets of Athena, I guess. So phosphorus, savior, and what is this next term? Ergain, or the artificer. Just read this paragraph. Again, she is phosphorus, as every way extending intellectual light. The savior, as establishing every partial intellect in the total intellections of her father. Ergain, or the artificer, as presiding over demiurgic works. Hence the theologist Orpheus says that the father produced her, quote, that she, the queen, might be of mighty works. but she is Kaliergos, or the beautiful fabricator, as connecting by beauty all the works of her father, a virgin, as exerting an undefiled and unmingled purity, and Aegiocus, or aegis-bearing, as moving the whole of fate and being the leader of its productions. So Athena is said to move the whole of fate. That would make sense if fate is connected to that veil of Athena, which weaves together the contraries, and is the seed of the substrate of the spermaticos logos, reason principles of nature. Leader of the productions of fate, Athena. We should also discuss the remaining appellations of the goddess, if what we have already said might not appear to be prolix through my sympathy with the discussion. So Proclus is acknowledging that he's taking forever to get through this stuff on Athena. Proclus, of course, was devoted to Athena. Again, therefore, recurring to the thing proposed, we must say that Plato calls both these divinities, Eros and Athena, philosophers, not for the same reason, but he thus denominates the former as being the middle of wholes and as leading to intelligible wisdom, and the latter as summit of wholes and as the union of demiurgic wisdom. For the demiurge is Metis, the first generator and much pleasing love, and as Metis indeed he brings forth Minerva, but as love he generates the amatory series. So Zeus is called love, apparently, and Metis, let's get a definition or a description of the term Metis, which gods that was associated with. Here it seems like associated with Zeus, but Metis, wisdom, skill, or craft, was a separate god, or actually, these are nymphs. A nymph, one of the Oceanids. She is notable for being the first wife and advisor of Zeus, the king of the gods. She helped him to free his siblings from their father Cronus' stomach by giving him an emetic, and when she was swallowed by Zeus, after it was foretold that she would bear a son mightier than his father, helped their daughter Athena to escape from his forehead. So that's why Metis is associated with both Athena and Zeus. Okay, cool. Next quote. The ancient Athenians, therefore, using these laws, and being formed by good institutions in a still greater degree than I have mentioned, inhabited this region, surpassing all men in every virtue, as it becomes those to do, who are the progeny and pupils of the gods. Oh yeah, and I see thanks in the Jitsi call for putting that visual aid up. You can't see it in the YouTube, but yeah, we'll maybe you can send that in the Telegram as a resource if you don't mind. But cool, appreciate it. All right, so Proclus. We learn from history that the affairs of the Athenians are more ancient than those of the Sacians, that the establishment of their city is prior, and that their laws are more proximate to Athena. But in the mundane paradigms, also, wholes are prior to parts, and there is an order in them which is more divine, a power which is greater, and a form of virtue which is truly Athenaic. For the genus of virtue is adapted to this greatest divinity, as being virtue herself. So Athena is virtue in some sense. For abiding in the demiurge, she is wisdom and immutable intelligence, and in the ruling or supermundane gods, she unfolds the power of virtue. By virtue's worthy name she's called, says Orpheus. Virtue is an epithet of Athena. That's worth remembering. It is evident, however, that things which are more divine in the universe may be called the progeny and pupils of the gods, for they derive their subsistence and are perfected, or rather they are always perfect, through the fabrication of the gods and the undefiled production of Athena. Everything, therefore, which is suspended and originates from the gods and is converted to them exhibits transcendent virtue. But this also is in wholes, since it must be admitted that there is divine virtue in the universe, and it is likewise in human lives according to a similitude to wholes. Hence, what is now said is applied to the Athenians, but making the life of the Athenians to be one and continued, it conjoins Solon to the ancient inhabitants of Athens, for it says, they inhabited this region. For the paradigm of them is one, and in continuity with itself, since the whole of the Athenaic series being one, extends as far as to the last of things and originates supernally from the supramundane orders. Okay, we will just keep going. Next quote. Many and mighty deeds, therefore, of your city are recorded in our temples and are the subject of admiration, yet there is one which surpasses all of them in magnitude and virtue. The priest, having promised summarily to relate the laws and deeds of the Athenians, he delivered indeed their laws according to a division of genre, and it therefore remained for him to celebrate their deeds, through which an encomium is passed on the city, and the tutelar goddess is praised. Since, however, of deeds there is a number, and there is also one unity comprehensive of them, according to which the whole form of the polity is exhibited, he announces that he shall narrate the greatest deed, and which surpasses all the rest in virtue, this deed not being one of the many, but one prior to the many. So why this one exemplary deed? Because we want to capture the nature of the city as a whole, so its laws and its deeds are kind of maybe like essence and energy, and so its energy we want to capture as like the energy as a whole, the one prior to the many, the whole prior to the parts of energy, the one energy. And so the greatest is symbolic of that, capturing all the deeds in one, I guess. For such a method of narration subsists appropriately with reference to the universe, in which wholes accomplish and connectedly contain one life and collect many contrarieties into one union with the goddess. Okay, so the universe is one, and so there should be one story that encompasses the nature of the Athenians. Hence, as there were many and great deeds of the city, the priest very properly relates one deed which was recorded in the temples, for there is also an intellectual paradigm of it, so far as it is surveyed in the world, and which transcends in magnitude and virtue. Transcendency according to magnitude, presenting to our view that which is total, but according to virtue, that which is intellectual. For wholes, and the more divine of mundane natures, have many energies of the greatest magnitude, and accomplish one life and polity, conformably to which, fighting under Athena, they vanquish all subordinate beings. After this manner, therefore, we must explain what is said. Porphyry, however, by great and admirable deeds, understands such as are accomplished by souls against matter and material modes, but he calls daimons material modes. For according to him, there are two species of daimons, of which the one consists of souls, but the other of modes, and these are material powers which are noxious to the soul. So there are daimons which are souls, and then the other species of daimons which are modes, material powers. So I think Damascus calls those the materially invested daimons, which they're noxious to the soul. For these dogmas, however, he is corrected by the interpreter that came after him. That is Iamblichus, but he doesn't say how Iamblichus corrects. In any case, that's not what the text symbolizes according to Proclus. Next quote. For these writings relate what a mighty power your city once tamed, which, rushing from the Atlantic Sea, spread itself with hostile fury all over Europe and Asia. All right. So Atlantis is raised, and I'm especially interested in Proclus's comments pertaining to Atlantis, so we're finally kind of getting into that here. Proclus. Plato, in what is here said, neither omits anything of encomiastic augment, so he doesn't fail to praise adequately, if the war of the Athenians against the Atlantics is considered as a mere history. Nor, so if it's just history, he doesn't fail to respect to the history, nor fails in theological accuracy in conjunction with caution, if anyone is willing to pass from partial natures to wholes and to proceed from images to paradigms. As it is usual, therefore, in Panathenaic orations to celebrate most amply the Persian expedition and victories of the Athenians both by land and sea, with which more recent orators fill their orations, Plato, in praising the Athenians, neither delivers the Persian invasion nor any other similar deed, but introducing the Atlantic war against the parts inhabited by us, and which rushed from the external sea with a force capable of entirely destroying these parts, he informs us that the Athenians were victorious and that they subdued this mighty power. Since, however, the Persian expedition came from the east against the Greeks, and particularly against the Athenians, Plato introduces the Atlantic war from the west, in order that you may survey the city of the Athenians as from a center, castigating a barbaric multitude pouring against it on each side in a disorderly manner. So this places Athens at the center, to which may be added that in the institutes delivered by the ancestors of the Athenians, and also in the mysteries, the gigantic war is celebrated, right? The war of the giants against the gods against the giants? Okay. And that's different than the war against the Titans. The giants are a different class of things. This lady, Mary Sedegast, also speculates that the memory of the war of the giants actually was the memory of the the Atlantean war. But that's just speculation by Mary Sedegast. But interesting that the gigantic war is brought up right as Proclus begins discussing the Atlantic war. Okay. In the institutes delivered by the ancestors of the Athenians, and also in the mysteries, the gigantic war is celebrated, and the victory of Athena over the giants, because in conjunction with her father she vanquished these and the Titans. Plato, however, does think it safe immediately to introduce war against the gods. Does not think it safe. Plato does not think it safe immediately to introduce war against the gods, for this is the very thing which he blames in the ancient poets, and it would be absurd that Critias or Timaeus, who were auditors of what Socrates said against the poets on the preceding day, should again ascribe wars and seditions to the gods. So the way he's writing about it, like he sets the Atlantic War in the west to make Athens the center, and also the way he's saying that he had to make it a kind of mortal contest because making it about the gods would be inconsistent with the ideals, the way the ideal state treated poets. So the way Proclus is writing here makes it seem like Plato is coming up with this, not that it's necessarily historical. Although he admits, like, if it's historical, he didn't fail to be appropriately laudatory of the history. So Proclus is kind of treating it ambivalently, whether it's historical or not, although I think he will defend the fact that it's historical, despite him indicating that Plato made, authorial decisions on the basis of, symbolic stuff, like putting it at the center, and also continuity with other works, which indicates more like Plato had the option. It wasn't just what it was, but through the analogy of human to divine concerns, he delivers this Atlantic war prior to the fabrication of the world, assuming the Athenians instead of Athena and the Olympic gods, and the Atlantics instead of the Titans and giants. Or maybe the war of the giants is similar, connected with the war against the Titans. I think there are two separate wars, but okay. Atlantis represents the Titans and giants. For it is possible, and that also kind of vindicates Mary Sedegast's remarks as well. For it is possible to survey the same things in images as in wholes. And that I may remind you of the analogy, through the name of the Athenians, he refers his readers to the Olympian coordination which fought under the command of Athena, but through that of the Atlanteans to the Titanic gods. For the mighty Atlas was one of the Titans. Okay, so from the name of Athena, the name of Atlas, he takes the Athenians and Atlanteans, so that obviously is symbolical of this gigantomachy. The theologists also, after the laceration of Dionysus, which manifests the divisible progression into the universe under Zeus from the impartible fabrication, says that the other Titans had different allotments, but that Atlas was established in the western parts, sustaining the heavens. By strong necessity, the widespread heaven in earth's extremes by Atlas was sustained. Okay. So this is one of the theologists. It doesn't give a source, though. Farther still, the victories of Athena are celebrated by the Athenians, and there is a festival sacred to the goddess in consequence of her having vanquished Neptune, that is Poseidon, and from the genesiurgic being subdued by the intellectual order, and those that inhabit this region betaking themselves to a life according to intellect after the procurement of necessities. For Neptune presides over generation, but Athena is the inspective guardian of an intellectual life. So there it says that she is a guardian in function, but I don't know if that means she's also in the order of the guardian gods, but okay. The things proposed, therefore, will contribute in the greatest degree to these analogies. For the Athenians, bearing the name of the goddess, are analogous to her, and the Atlantics, through inhabiting an island, and through being called the progeny of Poseidon, preserve an analogy to this god. So that it is evident from these things that the Atlantic war indicates the middle fabrication, according to which the second father, Poseidon, being filled by Athena and the other invisible causes, governs diviner natures in a more powerful manner, and subjects all things as have a multiplied, divisible, and more material hypostasis to intellectual natures. For the gods themselves, indeed, are eternally united, but the beings which are governed by them are filled with this kind of division. After this manner, therefore, these things must be separately understood. Okay, so the war indicates the middle fabrication. He mentions 3 fabrications. I think this means first fabrication, the celestial; second fabrication, the world of generation, sublunar world; and then the third is that which connects them. That's as I remember it being detailed, but we have not seen a good exposition of the 3 fabrications. But in any case, the war here represents the middle, which has Poseidon being filled by Athena and distributing intellectual natures to material things. So Poseidon distributes intellectual natures to material things, even though Athena was said to be the source of philosophical natures, but Poseidon, I guess, acts as an intermediary in some capacity, probably on the side of matter. Water is symbolic of matter, Poseidon, god of the oceans. So I can see sort of why that might be. In order, however, that we may pre-assume certain definite forms of the proposed analysis, it must be admitted that the habitations within the pillars of Hercules are analogous to the whole of the more excellent, but those external to them, to the whole of the inferior coordination. So inside the pillars, more excellent; those outside, the whole of the inferior coordination. and that of this there is one continued and variously proceeding life. The war is between both, that one life which contains contraries is common, and the two coordinations, I assume, indicate material natures and intelligible natures, which are involved both in the world of generation. Whether, therefore, beginning from the gods, you speak to the Olympian and Titanic divinities, or beginning from intellect, of permanency and motion, or sameness and difference, or from souls, you speak of the rational and irrational, or from bodies, of heaven and generation, or in whatever other way you may divide essences, according to all divisions, all the genus of those within the Pillars of Hercules will be analogous to the better, but of those without, to the less excellent coordination of things. So however you cut it, basically. The Athenians and those in the Pillars of Hercules represent we have permanency, Atlantic's motion, Athenians sameness, Atlantic's difference. At the level of souls, Athenians rational, Titanic's irrational, etc. For the true sea of dissimilitude and the whole of a material life which proceeds into interval and multitude from the one are there. Hence, whether you are willing orphically to arrange the Olympian and Titanic genre in opposition to each other, and to celebrate the former as subduing the latter, or pythagorically to perceive the two coordinations proceeding from on high as far as to the last of things, and the better adorning the subordinate rank, so subduing, or we have adorning the subordinate, or platonically to survey much of infinity and much of bound in the universe, as we learn in the Philebus, and the whole of infinity in conjunction with the measures of bound, producing generation, which extends through all mundane natures. From all these, you may assume one thing, that the whole composition of the world is co-harmonized from this contrariety. And if the illustrious Heraclitus, looking to this, said, that war is the father of all things, he did not speak absurdly. Important to note that Proclus does not firmly believe that Heraclitus meant that, but if Heraclitus meant that by this phrase, then he was in the right. Porphyry, therefore, here refers the theory to daimons and souls, and makes mention of the fabulous Titanic War, adducing some things to what is proposed to be considered with probability, but others without it. The divine Iamblichus, however, against those who adopt a more partial assignation of the cause of the analysis, is of opinion, after a certain wonderful manner, that what is said is only to be understood according to the apparent meaning, though in the preface he himself delivers to us auxiliaries for the solution of such like narrations. May that divine man, however, who has instructed us in many other particulars, and also in these, be propitious to us. Betaking ourselves, therefore, to the interpretation of the words of Plato, we think it fit to remind ourselves of the before-mentioned forms of analysis. So maybe the divine man here, being a deceased person, Proclus more or less prays to him to bless his perhaps original analysis here. We think it fit to remind ourselves of the before-mentioned forms of analysis, and that we must arrange the Atlantics according to all the total natures of the inferior coordinations. For in these also some things are wholes, but others parts. But we must arrange their insolent injustice according to progression, a division through diminution, and a proximity to matter. For matter is truly infinity and baseness. Hence, through nearness to, and being in a certain respect in it, they are said to have acted injuriously from insolence. Okay. For the paradigm of them is manifested by the theologist through these names, when he says of them, quote, that their mind is replete with evil counsels, and their heart is insolent. And we must arrange the rushing from external parts according to a defection and separation remote from the gods, and things of diviner of a diviner nature in the universe. Okay, so this is a quote from the dialogue: the rushing from external parts. We must arrange the rushing from external parts according to defection and separation remote from the gods. Okay, so deviation, procession away from the gods towards matter and things of a diviner nature in the universe. So that makes sense. For the external does not indicate comprehension of powers, but a hypostasis departing from everything stable, immaterial, pure, and united. Yeah, so external to the pillars of Hercules indicates not a stable hypostasis, but one descending to matter. Just like, the kenoma in Gnosticism is external to the pleroma. The one, in some sense, is the center of all things, and it emanates out to non-being and matter at its extremes. But the Atlantic Sea must be arranged according to matter itself, whether you call it the abyss or the sea of dissimilitude, or in whatever other way you may be willing to denominate it. For matter receives the appellation of the inferior coordination, being called infinity and darkness, irrationality and immoderation, the principle of diversity in the dyad, just as from the Atlantic Sea, the Atlantic island was denominated. So we call matter any of these things in the column of, like the column of the even from Pythagoreanism, more or less. For thus receiving the analogies in order, we shall understand that the whole of the inferior coordination and the more total and partial genre in it are characterized by progression and division, and a conversion to matter, and that thus it proceeds through all things, presenting itself to the view appropriately in each, and appearing analogously in each nature, viz., the divine and intellectual, the psychical and corporeal. Being, however, such, it is adorned and arranged by the better order, which you may properly say is Athenaic, as being undefiled and subduing through its power things of a subordinate nature. But the inferior coordination, becoming adorned, ceases from its abundant division and infinity. So once it's ordered, it stops dividing and being all infinite. The genus of the Titans being connected by the Olympian gods, but difference being united by sameness, motion by permanency, irrational by rational souls, generation by the heavens, and in a similar manner in all things. It must not, however, be supposed from this that twofold divided principles of things are to be admitted. So that's not dualism, but for we say that these two coordinations are of a kindred nature, but the one precedes all contrariety, as the Pythagoreans also say. Since, however, after the one cause of all, a dyad of principles is unfolded into light, and in these the monad is more excellent than the dyad, or if you wish to speak Orphically, ether than chaos. Okay, so these are Orphic terms for monad and dyad, ether and chaos. That's pretty good. The divisions are accomplished after this manner in the gods prior to the world, and also in the mundane gods as far as to the extremity of things. So the divisions of the gods are also along the lines of monad and indefinite dyad. All the henads fall more in one column or the other. Generally speaking, the female gods will be in the indefinite dyad column, masculine gods in the column with the limit. That's what I've seen before. For among the supramundane gods, the demiurgic and connective orders are under the monad, but the vivific and the generative orders are under the dyad. Then what about the demiurgic order? Okay, so of supramundane gods, oh yeah, demiurgic is right there. So once again, we have demiurgic, guardian, connective, perfective, and so vivific and generative, I think these are different terms than what Proclus used last time when he listed 5 of them. But okay, here we'll just remember what he's saying here. So the demiurgic and connective orders are under the monad. The vivific, and generative orders are under the dyad. Remember, Rhea was under the vivific as far as one of those. And then who's under generative? Not sure. Maybe Aphrodite. And demiurgic and connective are under the monad. I would assume the guardian would also be under the monad, but okay. But among mundane gods, the Olympian genus is under the monad, but the Titanic under the dyad. And sameness, permanency, reason, and form are under the more ancient, but difference, motion, irrationality, and matter are under the other of these principles. For as far as to these, the diminution of the two principles proceeds, all the way down to matter. Since, however, the one is beyond the first dyad, things which appear to be contraries are collected together and are co-arranged with a view to one orderly distribution of things. So all opposites have their union in the one and are not true. There's no absolute opposition, which just follows because it has to occur in some medium. That medium, the matter or substrate of the contraries, is adapted to both, connects both, of course. For in the universe there are these twofold genera of gods, and oppositely divided genera of being, the various genera of souls and the contrary genre of bodies. But the subordinate are vanquished by the more divine, and the world is rendered one, being harmonized from contraries, since it subsists, according to Philolaus, from things that bound and from things that are infinite. And according to the infinite indeed, which it contains, it derives its subsistence from the indefinite dyad, or the nature of the infinite, but according to things that bound, from the intelligible monad, or the nature of bound. And according to a subsistence from all these, it becomes one whole and all perfect form from the one. For it is God, as Socrates says in the Philebus, who gives subsistence to that which is mixed. Oh, that helps to interpret the Philebus. Remember, intellect was said to be the cause of the mixture, but that makes sense with the scopos of the Philebus that Damascus had discussed, being relegated to the goods of animal natures. And so that which causes mixture for animal natures is always subordinate to the intelligible, and so there's no sense in addressing the cause of mixture in the first hypostasis. But Proclus applies that here too, that God is not just the intelligible God or intellectual God, but God simply, the one, is that which gives subsistence to that which is mixed. Cool. All right, if the next section is very long, it's not very, very long. We'll go ahead and take a crack at it. Here's the lemma. For at that time, the Atlantic Sea was navigable and had an island before that mouth, which is called by you the Pillars of Hercules, or Heracles. But this island was greater than both Libya and Asia together, and afforded an easy passage to other neighboring islands, as it was likewise easy to pass from those islands to all the opposite continent which surrounded that true sea. Proclus. That such and so great an island once existed is evident from what is said by certain historians respecting what pertains to the external sea. For, according to them, there were 7 islands in that sea, in their times, sacred to Persephone, and also 3 others of an immense extent, one of which was sacred to Hades, another to Ammon, and the middle or second of these to Poseidon, the magnitude of which was 1,000 stadia. I don't know who Ammon is supposed to be. That's an Egyptian deity. Yeah, I don't want to look up who the Greek corollary might be at the moment. If it's important, it'll come up again. They also add that the inhabitants of it preserved the remembrance from their ancestors of the Atlantic island which existed there and was truly prodigiously great, which for many periods had dominion over all the islands in the Atlantic Sea, and was itself likewise sacred to Poseidon. These things, therefore, Marcellus writes in his Ethiopic history. I don't know if that's a surviving text. Marcellus, we'll just look up Marcellus first and then see which works. Let's see. Nephew of Augustus. I'll type in the history title so that we're not looking for multiple Marcelluses. Ethiopic history. Marcellus in his work Ethiopica. Okay, interesting. All I'm seeing is quoted by Proclus, so I don't think that this is a surviving. I don't think this is a surviving text, but we can look. I'm going to do a little more digging on it. But okay, that's 100 BC time period for Marcellus. All right. If, however, this be the case, and such an island once existed, it is possible to receive what is said about it as a history, and also as an image of a certain nature among wholes. Unfolding likewise, let's see. Karnak in the... apparently... It is extant. Okay, so that's something we can read, potentially. Thank you for finding that. All right. Unfolding likewise the similitude of this. So he's saying the islands are an image of a certain nature among wholes. Then we'll see what that is. Unfolding likewise the similitude of this, we may gradually accustom those who survey things of this kind to the whole theory of mundane natures. For it is possible to behold the same analogies in a more partial and in a more comprehensive way. But it is necessary that doctrine, proceeding from universals to the subtle elaboration of particulars, should thus give respite to theory. Okay. You must not therefore wonder if before we assumed this analogy more generally, but now after another manner, and that we explore the same thing with an accuracy adapted to the things themselves. For since, as we have said, there is a twofold coordination in the universe, which originates from the gods, and is terminated in matter and material form, and since each possesses things more total and things more partial, for this we have said before, but other things are the middles of both these coordinations, for the divine genre are comprehensive of all things, and the last elements are the vilest of all things, and the intellectual and psychical genre subsists between these. Okay. So the middle, the gods give the extremes of these coordinations and also the middle. This being the case, we think fit, in the first place, to divide in a threefold manner the inferior coordination, and to assume in it some things as most total genre, others as middle, and others as last genre. So we're going to divide the inferior coordination in a threefold way, getting the more total inferiors, middle inferiors, and the last inferiors, I think. And to some things, we shall arrange the Atlantics as analogous, to others the other islands, and to others all the opposite continents. Okay, so the Atlantics are like the superior inferiors, the other islands are the middle inferiors, and the opposite continent is the last inferior, I guess. But we shall consider the deep and the Atlantic Sea as analogous to matter. For all the inferior coordination is material and proceeds into multitude and division, but it also has, with respect to itself, transcendency and deficiency. Okay. Hence, Plato says that the Atlantics spread themselves externally, as being more remote from the one and nearer to matter, but that they inhabited an island larger than both Libya and Asia, as proceeding into bulk and interval. For all things that are more remote from the one are diminished according to power, but transcend according to quantity, just as such as are nearer the one are contracted in quantity, but possess an admirable power. Here, therefore, magnitude is significant of diminution and of progression and extension to everything. But the sea was then navigable, since more total natures proceed as far as to the last of things and adorn matter, but having arrived at the end of the order, they stop, and that which remains beyond it is infinite. For that which in no respect has a subsistence is successive to the boundaries of being. So it's outside of being. But the addition of those has an indication that total causes proceed without impediment through matter and adorn it, but that we do not always subdue it, but are merged in an infinite and indefinite nature. Since, however, the progression of things is continued and no vacuum anywhere intervenes, but a well-ordered diminution is surveyed from more total to middle natures, which comprehend and are comprehended, and from middle to the last and vilest natures. On this account, he says, there was a passage from the Atlantic island to the other islands, and from these to the opposite continent, and that the Atlantic was one, but the other islands many, and the continent was the greatest. For the monad is adapted to the first genus in everything, but number and multitude to the second, for multitude subsists together with the dyad, and magnitude is adapted to the third genus on account of the progression of magnitude to the triad. So in general, I guess, the monad is adapted to the first genus of everything, dyad to the multitude, and then the triad to magnitude. So we have monad first, dyad, multitude, triad, magnitude. And magnitude is adapted to the third genus on account of the progression of magnitude to the triad. Since, however, and I don't know why magnitude per se should be towards the triad, but okay. Since, however, the extremities of the worst coordination are most material, he manifests through the term opposite that they are at the greatest possible distance from more excellent natures. And he does not alone use the term external, as he does of the Atlantics, and which evinces that they belong to the other part, but he also adds the word opposite, that he may indicate the most extreme diminution. But he signifies by the words about that true sea, the hypostasis of them about matter, and the last of mundane natures. For the true sea is analogous to that which is truly false and truly matter, which in the Statesman he calls the sea of dissimilitude. Moreover, because it is necessary that these twofold coordinations should be separated from each other without confusion and guarded by demiurgic boundaries, on this account he says that the pillars of Hercules separated the internal from the external habitable part. For he denominates flourishing demiurgic production and the divine separation of genre in the universe, the latter of which always remains stably and strenuously the same, the pillars of Heracles. Okay, so flourishing demiurgic production and divine separation of genre are the pillars of Heracles. Flourishing production and divine separation of genre. This Heracles, therefore, is Zeusian, but the one prior to this, who is divine, is allotted the guardian order of the generative series. Hence, from both the demiurgic division, which guards these two separate parts of the universe, must be assumed. Hence, from both the demiurgic division, which guards these two separate parts of the universe, must be assumed. So there are like two Heracleses. One is prior to the who is fully divine, and he is allotted the guardian order of the generative series. Okay, generative series of gods. He's one of the guardian gods there. Heracles under the guardian order. And then here, Heracles is responsible for... He's under Zeus, flourishing demiurgic productions and divine separation of genre. So Heracles at the lower level, who's not fully divine, I guess, is symbolic of those Zeusian powers and cosmically. We're going to go with that and come back to this when we have time during the week. So Thanks, everyone. We will pick this up soon.